大家好，欢迎来到缓冲带。今天我请来了一个我的朋友，他来自美国，名字叫 Jordan。Jordan 跟我非常的有缘，他跟我虽然来自不同的国家，但是我们在2012年、13年的时候去的是同一所大学，读的是同一个系的研究生。我们工作了几年之后，选择了同样的一个导师，然后又来到了同样的一个奥克兰大学政治系读博。所以我跟他当时4年前是一见如故，现在成了很好的朋友。因为他不懂中文，所以我在这里吐槽一下。4年前我遇到他的时候，他头上还有头发的，现在不多了。Okay, do you want to say hi to our audience?
Hello, it's nice to meet you. I guess if that's what the analog is here. Thanks very much for having me today. I'm looking forward to speaking with you. Yeah.
Great. Okay. Like I told you, we're gonna do a 5-episode sort of series, right, on U.S. politics to discuss basically what's happening after the election and our reflections on the future and the past. So in this first episode, I'd like to focus on something personal. I'd like to know, you as a white male, as an educated white male, what is your take on the U.S. politics, on this recent election? What kind of knowledge do you have about your family's, political opinions, and whether Donald Trump has caused any, divisions within your family like he did in the nation? Okay.
I can speak to some of those things. Yeah, sure.
Yeah, of course. Okay.
So I am from a small farm town in the state of Illinois, in the Midwest of the United States. I'm from a county called Grundy County that in 2016 voted 70%, I think, in favor of President Trump. It followed sort of a trend of quite a few rural counties in the United States that supported President Trump and voted Republican. In 2020, I think my home county again selected President Trump. I haven't looked at but I just expect it's the case. So I definitely have family members that support support different parties. They support the Republicans. They support the Democrats. Friends and family members. We've had some difficult conversations in those times. In the last 4 years.
Right.
And I think the sort of division that we've seen nationally is representative of the sort of tensions that people feel in their family and friend groups. I think a lot of people have had personal relationships, put in jeopardy or maybe even lost because of these deeply held political divisions.
All right. Yeah. That's a very good overview of the whole topic we're going to have here.
Okay, great.
Okay, so let's delve into the specifics. All right. So the small town that you came from, what's it called again?
Yeah, so I'm from Grundy County.
Grundy County, okay.
Grundy County in Illinois, yeah.
Yeah, right. So what's the population there?
So my hometown has a population of about 12,000 people.
12,000.
The county as a whole, I couldn't possibly say, but the city where I'm from is the largest city in the county.
Okay.
It's a rural space. It's cornfields and bean fields. The stars at night.
All right.
People, if they work in offices, they probably commute to larger places.
Right.
But there's a lot of farming happening there. It's a lovely, nice small town.
Okay.
Yeah.
So is it a traditionally Republican stronghold or?
I would expect. So yeah, I think the votes tend to go that way.
And another question is, how diverse is your hometown?
So my hometown is not terribly diverse at all.
Yeah.
Been home in a couple of years now, but it overwhelmingly white. Overwhelmingly white. I think
right.
It's the simple answer.
Any Chinese people there?
Golly gee. You know what? I'm not sure if any Chinese people live in my hometown.
All right.
There was always a single Chinese takeaway place.
Okay.
And it changed.
Is it
changed,
authentic?
I found out later, quite later, because I just didn't have the experience.
Yeah.
That it was very much an American interpretation.
Yeah. Does it sell like General Tso chicken?
Yeah. So it's all
okay,
like
so it's not authentic.
The sweet and sour and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah. No, that's not Chinese. Okay. All right.
It's quite different from the Chinese food that you get here.
Yeah, of course, yeah. So that the town overwhelmingly voted for Trump in 2016. Was that a big surprise, or was it just consistent with previous voting track record?
Yeah, I think so. The voting, the brand voting, I think, stayed relatively consistent.
Okay.
So that Republican brand,
Yeah.
right? People have these identities. So here's a piece that we can talk about in American politics. Connection to parties is often identity based or associated, and so people think of themselves when they identify themselves. I am an X. People will quite often say, we'll say things like, I am a Republican, or I am a Democrat, or I am a constitutional conservative, or I am a social progressive, things like that they mean to associate with one brand or the other. So maybe not terribly surprising that space made that vote. I think in the 2016 case, the results were surprising.
In terms of?
Just in that it was a bit surreal that someone with the personal characteristics that President Trump possesses could be such a compelling favorite, or it could be such a compelling option for so many people.
All right,
Yeah.
Okay.
Independent of the sorts of messaging that happened during the campaign.
Okay.
More about that person specifically.
Okay, so despite this consistency of political, affiliation, still 2016 was sort of a shock.
That's a good way to say it. There's a bit of like almost naivety about it, right? In hindsight, to say that like, surely everyone will come to the same judgment that we've come to.
So you just mentioned that U.S. politics, the party affiliation is heavily identity based.
Mm-hmm.
So what is your identity?
Yeah. So I am registered independent. I voted for Republicans and Democrats at different levels of representativity, from the local to the national. What I try to do when I'm making a choice about who should represent me in the political process is look at the sorts of things that they say and do, and the sorts of policy proposals that they make.
Right.
Yeah.
So can I say that for you, politics is not as identity based as your hometown folks?
Well,
rather it's more like topic based or policy based.
Yeah, you can say that. I think that maybe my critics wouldn't say that.
Who are your critics?
Well, so in social media spaces, I've made quite an effort during the 2016 campaign time,
right,
and then for about 2 years, really the first 2 years of the Trump administration,
right.
I made quite an effort to reach out and engage in critical discourse with people who thought a range of different things, especially in places where we disagreed.
Okay.
To try to get a better understanding of what they thought, why they thought it, what they thought about the things that I held to be, true in those spaces.
Right. So to put it simply, you were being naive and idealistic.
That's one way to say it. The results might indicate that.
Yeah. So it didn't go well. These persuasive attempts.
Well, not necessarily persuasive, even just like dialogical, like just discursive, right? Trying to engage in discussion,
right,
and to get people to take up the idea that that other people have genuine reasons for the things that they think.
Yeah.
And quite often what I found was that my efforts to have those discussions in those social media spaces they felt unproductive. And it's impossible.
I can imagine,
It's impossible to say how productive they actually were, because it's one of those things where you don't know how many people are watching and reading without interacting with it, or
that's true. Yeah,
things like
you
that.
might have changed a few lives there, but without realizing it.
Well, some people would message me privately and say, "Oh, this thing, I agree with this," or "You changed my mind about this," which is very nice.
Yeah.
And there were other cases where I'd have a conversation with somebody and I'd say something to them and they'd blow it off, but a couple of weeks later I'd watch them somewhere else.
So they were mirroring your images, but
they wouldn't take it in the moment.
In the beginning, they didn't.
That's right.
Didn't agree with you.
So it's impossible to say how effective or how productive it was. I can say this though: it certainly felt unsatisfying in the moment.
Fair enough. So online discussion is not quite a successful attempt.
No. It was nowhere near as successful as I wished.
Yeah. Okay. So and your party affiliation is not as fixed as a lot of people.
So that's fair to say.
Yeah.
I think that's fair to say. So when you say the identity connection, I think that people who disagree with me would be more likely to say things like, "Oh, he's just an X," like, "Oh, he's just a Democrat," or something like that.
But you
or,
refuse
"Oh, he's just
to be defined by that.
That's not how I see myself.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. That's very cool. It's so rare these days to to judge to make a political decisions based on specific policies or leaders instead of just saying, okay, I voted Republican all the time, so I'm still voting Republican.
Yeah,
this unreflective choice about politics. That's something we should try to avoid, right?
No, so I agree with you. I agree with you wholeheartedly there.
So you don't consider yourself a loyal Republican. Which means you're something of an outlier.
Sure,
right?
That's fair.
Yeah, in the demographics.
Yeah.
So, what sort of things influenced you as you grew up to become what you are today? To become an independent instead of a Democrat or Republican.
That's interesting. That's a really interesting question. I mean, thank you very much. I don't know. It's hard to say. In my childhood, I know that my parents both emphasized the virtue or the importance of critical thinking.
Okay.
It's a phrase that got passed around society quite a bit.
Yeah.
And I think I might have just taken it a bit too literally, or maybe more literally than some of my peers.
Okay. You went too far.
That's right. I've gone too far.
That's why you're here.
With
the bald head.
That's right. I've thought every hair in my head just right off.
Yeah.
Worried them all away. I think that's the thing. Critical thinking is emphasized, but I also come from a family with a history of public service, and so that's the thing that I think seeing yourself involved in a common project is a very important part of I think that the bonds that the ties that bind us, right, as community
civic
members.
Spirit.
That's right.
Yeah,
and I think that's the thing that's in danger, if not largely missing. Is that folks seem to see themselves, Americans seem to quite often see themselves as not just opponents, but enemies, and certainly not involved in the same project.
Right.
And
so mutual demonization, basically, that Biden referred to.
And the rhetoric turns on these things like the fate of the nation, or the spirit of the nation, or things like that.
Yeah.
And they folks genuinely do see themselves in a mortal struggle with people who will eradicate their way of life. And it's difficult to make something together with those people, or to even think that you should. So it's tough.
Yeah, I can imagine.
I don't see it that way.
Okay.
But that's,
Okay. Here comes another probably a little bit embarrassing question.
Thank you.
So how did your family members vote? Are you aware of that?
Oh, sure. Not embarrassing at all. So I will, for their, out of respect for those particular family members, I'll we'll sort of divorce identity from it. But I certainly have had family members vote Republican and Democrat.
Yeah.
I have had tough conversations with, Republican and Democrat in the 2016 and 2020 elections.
Okay, so
these are specific spaces.
People who voted for Trump and people who didn't, basically.
This is the tension, right?
Yeah.
Because voting Republican and voting Democrat in the pre-Trump era, less contentious.
Right.
There was some contention around President Bush, President George W. Bush, of course. Especially in 2004, once we were already engaged in two different wars.
Yeah.
But those things are different. It just palpably different.
Yeah.
I've had very difficult discussions with people that are quite dear to me, and you kind of get yourself to a position where you need to live and let live, and accept that other people can make their own choices for their own reasons. That they're empowered to do those things.
Yeah.
You can think that they're wrong. They might think that you're wrong. But at the end of the day, you have to make some... And so this is quite a difficult space, because there are some things in tension here. One is the idea that each of us, in a democratic tradition, which is a bit complicated, in representative politics, where one person has one vote, each person is empowered to make their own choice for their own reasons about who they want to represent them.
Of course, that's the purpose of democracy.
But when you have people concerned with things like justice, it can run into some tension where people say, how can you tolerate these sorts of views when it causes other people to suffer?
Yeah.
And so this is really a thing that drives tension in relationships, I think, is that, people talked running up right at the cusp of the 2020 election, especially on election day, I think. I saw people saying things like, listen, whoever wins this election, we've got to figure things out afterwards. Mm-hmm. And a broad response to this was something like, how dare you? How dare you say that we should just bind ourselves back together with xenophobes, with racists and sexists and people who say mean things,
Yeah.
And it's quite, I get it, because people who are and have been suffering generationally, even for hundreds of years. I think that the struggle of Black Americans is come to the forefront here in the recent years, especially through things like the Black Lives Matter movement and things like that. these people quite fairly say, how much longer do I have to put up with this? How much longer do I have to be tolerant of your intolerance to live a fair life or a life on fair terms as an equal citizen? How long do I have to wait for the things to which I'm constitutionally entitled?
Well, I mean, okay, so for these people, let's think about those people who voted Trump. Were those people who voted for Trump saying, you guys have to wait a little bit longer?
I think the people...
Was that the message?
It depends on the person. I think quite often the view is that those inequalities don't exist for the reasons that people think. So let me try to unpack that a bit. I think what a Trump supporter might say to somebody who feels like they are oppressed because of some unchangeable characteristic about themselves,
like color and gender,
things like that. They might say that you're not oppressed because of your color. You're suffering some other there are some other reasons. There are economic reasons. There are some other reasons that we can point to that show that you're suffering. And they'll rely on sometimes anecdotal data, things like survivorship bias and things like that.
好，这里我们暂停一下，解释一下什么是幸存者偏见。当一个人只是基于经过了某些筛选后可以看到的案例得出有偏颇的结论，他就犯了幸存者偏见的逻辑谬误。还是不明白？举个例子，2019年，王思聪说了一句在网上受到热议的话，他说：“这年头还有人没出过国。”这就是典型的幸存者谬误。他只通过观察自己所处的富人阶层，就认为所有人都肯定有过出国的经历，但他观察到的案例本身就是经过了阶层的筛选，导致他忽视了中国庞大的中产和贫困人口。
And they'll rely on sometimes anecdotal data, things like survivorship bias and things like that, to show that, oh look, black people can be successful in America, therefore you can be successful in America.
So they're thinking you're not successful because you're not working hard enough. Not because you're black, like you're claiming right now.
That's right. And now I don't want to like group all of these arguments into one space, because that's certainly not the case of how they exist. But one line of argumentation might be to sort of leave aside or undervalue some systemic causes that hold people back and put more emphasis on individual level explanations. Quite a heavily, we would call it atomized, but like an individual responsibility sort of a story that you would tell that like leaves aside, systemic or social disadvantages that people face.
Yeah. You're going a bit too theoretical here.
Sorry about that.
It's okay. 这期视频我和 Jordan 主要是在讨论特朗普带来的社会分裂。当然，美国社会分裂也不是什么新闻，但 Jordan 分享的个人观察和视角和我们在媒体上看到的宏大叙事还是有一定的差异的。下一期视频，我和 Jordan 会继续讨论特朗普所带来的分裂，但是这一次我们讨论的是在家庭层面，以及 Jordan 作为一个知识分子做出的理解他人、弥合裂痕的尝试。欢迎继续收看。